So this week's review is going to be slightly different than my usual ones. It's going to be a more relaxed experience. Why is that? Well, you see, I got lazy and I have less than 24 hours to edit and publish this video, so I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite films. What Have You Done to Solange? So yes, today I'm once again talking about a Giallo. For people who are unfamiliar with that subgenre of horror, it was basically Italian murder mysteries inspired by pulp novels that really gained popularity in the mid-60s with Mario Bava's film The Girl Who Knew Too Much. And like most Italian horror films, they just got sleazier and sleazier as time went on. And that's about the last time I talked about a Giallo with gore in Venice, but today I'm taking a look at a, yes, very sleazy Giallo, but a slightly classier one. And that is of course Massimo Dallamano's What Have You Done to Solange, who personally, it's my favorite Giallo of all time. Yes, it is sleazy, but the amount of pure talent behind the camera kind of makes you feel like you're watching something that could be on the Criterion Collection until you see that the murders are done with stabbing vaginas. And there's quite the graphic abortion scene that really makes you uncomfortable. And for more spooky trivia, not only was this directed by Massimo Dallamano, who was a cinematographer on Sergio Leone films, it's also scored by Ennio Morricone, and of course the cinematography is done by Channel alumni and director of Black Emanuel films, Joe D'Amato. No, I am not kidding. Joe D'Amato was actually a very talented cinematographer before he jumped into the director's chair. And of course, the titular Solange is played by Camille Keen, who would later on gain popularity through, of course, I Spit on Your Grave. And our leading man is of course the very handsome Fabio Tezzi. So without further ado, what is this film about? And I won't go into too much details because if you've never seen this, you absolutely need to. I won't spoil anything, I'll just tell you the basic plot. It starts in London, on a boat on the Thames River, and we have this girl named Elizabeth, who is a Catholic schoolgirl, and we have this man, who's also a professor at that said school. You see, this is already going places where it shouldn't go. And you know, they're lovingly making out, and Elizabeth sees out of the corner of her eye a girl run away from something, and she kind of looks distressed. Elizabeth is of course also very confused, and she stops making out with our main character, who then tells her to, never mind that, let's keep making out. And then they keep kissing, and then she sees the reflection of a knife and totally freaks out, and then Fabio Tezzi has blue ball rage and just flips out. During that time, Professor Rossini, who is Fabio Tezzi's character, accidentally drops his pen on what is gonna become a crime scene. He then drives Elizabeth home because, he's a teacher having a relationship with his student. You don't really want people to know about that. The next morning, you see him get ready to actually do his job, which is teaching, not just diddling the students, and we meet his wife, and they don't really have the best relationship. You could have guessed that by the fact that he's cheating on her, but I'm just stating the obvious. And then he tells her to switch the radio because she's listening to the news and that's just depressing. He wants some good jazz music. But then he hears that there was a murder close to the Thames River where he was the day before with Elizabeth. And then he makes a very bad judgment calls and goes to the scene because that's clearly a good idea. Over there he sees the crime scene and then goes back to school. And then he arrives late at school and he has to make up an excuse and he says that his car is broken, which I mean, if it's A, British car, or B, an Italian car, they're both not reliable, so that's a good excuse there, Rossini. The only issue is there was a detective from Scotland Yard waiting on every teacher to show up to, tell them that one of their students had been murdered by vagina stabbing, which, yes, we see in detail. Thank you, movie. And already the detective is getting this weird vibe from Rossini, who's like, my car broke down. By the way, he's an Italian teacher, and if you listen to this movie with the English dub, he has the most absurdly stereotypical Italian accent ever, Which is why I listen to this in Italian, because I'm telling you the English dub is basically, "Oh mamma mia, I didn't kill the lady, I make the pizza."
Morbid curiosity. I told you.
And since this happens at a Catholic church, we see the students, mourning, and they go into church and they do confessions, which the theme of confession is one that's gonna go throughout the entire film. What did the young girls say to the priests in confession? Then we get more of an exploration of the relationship between Rossini and Elizabeth, and we can see that it's actually a pretty healthy relationship, even though student-teacher, but they actually kind of seem to have genuine feelings with another, and you really don't get a sense that Rossini is this creepy teacher that just wants to diddle the students. You actually see that he's genuinely in love with Elizabeth, and it's same feelings from her, which is actually something that I really like about this film. The characters are not cliches, they're actually pretty relatable. Even Rossini's wife, who you can see they have a rocky relationship, you understand why she's like that, and you understand why he's like that. The detective is not this typical, cliche asshole detective. He actually does his job very well, which is weird to see a competent police officer in any Giallo, but he's actually the one who does most of the work. But the detective does get suspicious of Rossini because, well, he was seen at the scene of the crime the next day, and of course, like an asshole, he dropped his pen, which is gonna lead to a scene where Rossini has to explain to the detective that he's having an affair with one of the students. During that time, his wife is of course listening in, and she already kind of knew. After that, because Rossini still thinks that his wife doesn't know, he rents an apartment, which, how cheap was rent in London, where a teacher could just rent an apartment for his mistress? How cheap was life in the 70s? Jesus Christ. It's downtown London. And he's like, "Oh yeah, mamma mia, take that, an entire apartment if you promise to one day suck on my cock." But of course, since this is a Giallo, it doesn't take a long time before we get another victim, which is another friend of the first victim and another friend of a little group in the Catholic school that, they're a little clique, the girls always hang out with each other, and that also will come back later. And of course, Elizabeth is haunted by what she saw in the beginning, and she keeps having nightmares. She did see what happened, but it was very blurry and confused, but the more the film goes on, the more she remembers. So one day, after a nightmare where she remembered a very important detail, she calls Rossini, and Rossini is like, "I don't know what to do, I don't want to get caught, but at the same time, it's kind of an important detail." And then when Elizabeth learns that, her other classmate got killed, she decides to go to the professor and discuss what she saw that day. Without mentioning, of course, that she was a teacher, because, let's be honest, that's not a detail she really needed to say. And that detail is that the killer was wearing a long black dress, kind of like a priest. And then because Elizabeth kind of went public with that information, well, she's gonna get unalived by drowning in Rossini's apartment, which of course is gonna put a lot of the blame on Rossini, and I'm not saying anymore. Honestly, I'm not spoiling the movie. This is everything you need to know, and if I've sold you on the movie, you should go watch it right now, because it's an amazing piece of Giallo filmmaking. Do I really need to say that the music is incredible? Like I previously said, the characters are actually pretty likable and they're well written and well developed. The relationship between Rossini and his wife just keep getting better as they try to find who murdered Elizabeth. This movie is quite a complex one, and it's a beautifully shot one. No surprise there, it's Massimo Dallamano, and for the time, the camera movements are very, very dynamic, and it's quite impressive. He loves the use of, wide-angle lens, and you get a first person kind of point of view from the killer at some points in the film, which was not new for the time but is very well executed. And the twist and the way the story, develops, you're actually quite surprised at the end. And the backstory is not just thrown in there, the motive behind the killing aren't just thrown in there at the end for absolutely no reason, just because they needed to explain the movie and then end. Like, there is a bit of exposition at the end. Finally, the thing I love the most about this film is that this is a bleak movie. This isn't a happy, fun watch. This is quite a sad, depressing, and gut-wrenching film. And if we're gonna use that dreaded term disturbing, it could actually fit this movie quite well. When I was done watching this for the first time, and oh boy, it's been a while, it's one of those films that I wish I could erase my memory and re-experience it for the first time again, but I was just on the floor like, fuck man, I feel like shit. Which, no, it's not a great feeling to have, but the fact that the movie can do such a great job to bring that feeling to you is a compliment to the film.
Probably noticed that Hilda Eriksson didn't come to school today.
So, do I recommend What Have You Done to Solange? Well, of course I do. Is that even a question? Like I said, this is easily in my top favorite films, not of just horror, of all time. It's a well-executed, masterfully crafted murder mystery, and just mystery. It has tension, it has drama, it has sex, it has blood, it has knives and pussies. I love this movie. I fucking love this movie. So if you haven't seen it, don't spoil it for yourself. Just watch the fucking thing. Thank you guys, and see you next time.